Gino's voice turned gentle, carrying with it a hint of worship. He did have heart disease. However, you'd never remember that if you were standing right next to him. He was such an optimistic person. He knew how to live a good life better than anyone else did. His type of person is very attractive. When you talk with him, you'd feel that every mundane day was wonderful. You'd try to improve yourself along with him. It was inconceivable. I admired him, but I was also envious of him. I used to quarrel with him for no reason. I only wanted to get closer to him. Stirring his coffee with a porcelain spoon, Gino smiled bitterly. Because I knew I would never be able to become someone like him. Finn never knew Gino felt this way about him. Nevertheless, Gino's past actions and words concerning him were unavoidably childish. From what you say, he truly sounds like a good person. Finn praised himself without holding back. It was a rather good feeling. Gino laughed in response. You're right. I once wondered that if I were in his shoes, an abandoned orphan with genetic heart disease, would I be able to stand up on my own, or would I resort to blaming everyone around me for my predicaments? Even if I were able to pick myself up, I think it'd be difficult for me to climb to Fiennes' position. Even now, I can only gaze at his back and continue to climb. It was wonderful being complimented like this, so much that Finn didn't mind consoling this junior actor of his. You're a Hollywood star right now. Even if you are to compete with him, you aren't that far below. Gino shook his head and replied, who can even compete with that old man? He's a natural-born actor. He was made to succeed in this industry. What had Gino called him just now? An old man? Please, he hadn't even been 40 when he died. At that moment, Gino's phone rang. The actor picked up the call and responded to the other side with a few sentences. Afterwards, he found a piece of paper and spoke in an apologetic voice while scribbling something down. My manager needs to see me for something. I have to go. This is my private cell phone number and messenger ID. Remember to contact me. Okay, Finn responded. Remember, you definitely have to contact me. It seemed like Gino was in a hurry as he immediately strode away after leaving behind the piece of paper. Finn sighed. Just when he was about to pick up the slip of paper, someone else got to it first. Finn looked up. A pale man with golden hair was standing in front of him. A pale hand had snatched away the piece of paper before he could pick it up. We meet again. What a coincidence, is it not? Without an invitation, Albert sat down in the chair Gino previously occupied with a slight smile. In order to not interrupt your conversation with that gentleman, I couldn't help but find someone to call him away. I'm very attentive, am I not? Sir, I don't know who you are. Quickly leave, you bastard. They were in a public location and were surrounded by waiters and other patrons of the coffee shop. Finn didn't believe Albert would dare do something in a crowded place like this. Your words hurt me. Holding the piece of paper in one hand, Albert pulled out a lighter from his pockets. Just when he was about to light the paper on fire, Finn flung the remainder of his coffee at him. Expressionlessly, Finn said, the air is really dry here. Be careful, things can catch on fire easily. Albert didn't anticipate Finn's action. He lifted his eyes and glanced at the other, only smiling faintly in response. Albert crumpled the slip of paper into a ball and dropped it into a half-filled coffee cup. That piece of paper will harm you. Hollywood stars are all a bunch of whores who look glamorous on the outside but are ruined on the inside. In a gentlemanly manner, Albert voiced out his opinions with the ugliest words possible. As a former Hollywood star, Finn stood up to leave. The quicker he could get away from Albert the better. Albert gave a quiet clap of his hands. Mr. Tang, please wait. The waiters standing around the coffee shop moved at the same time and walked toward the other customers' tables. Finn didn't know what they said to the customers, but everyone quickly cleared out of the coffee shop. Soon, only Albert, Finn, and the tall, suspicious-looking waiters remained. Please sit. Albert smiled politely at Finn. He then picked up a napkin and dabbed at the coffee that had splashed onto his clothes. Finn glanced at the waiters who were blocking the exits and slowly returned to his seat. Mr. Albert, I don't think I'm worthy enough for someone like you to personally entertain. Tossing the napkin aside, Albert snapped his fingers loudly and clearly. Quickly, a waiter came over and poured them 2 fresh cups of coffee. I know you don't like sugar in your coffee. Oh, of course, I'm talking about the current you. I've looked up your background. You used to like both sugar and milk in your coffee. No, it would be more accurate to say you didn't like coffee at all. I don't know how you've suddenly developed a liking for it. With a doubtful expression on his face, Albert sighed. He laced his fingers into a fist and rested his chin on it. Looking at the man opposite of him, he said, "It's truly strange. You used to be a type that I'm completely uninterested in. The past you is like one of those soulless, rich punks you can see everywhere around the corner in New York. Just like them, you didn't know how you would live each day. You had a large inheritance, but your terrible lifestyle soon left you scraping the bottom of the barrel for money. In the end, you had to sell your house to pay back your debts. Despite this, no one would feel any sympathy for you. There are plenty of people leading lives worse than yours in this world. But the past you decided to give up all hope. I don't like useless trash like you." Albert leaned backwards, crossed his legs, and tapped a finger on his knee. "Looking at you now, however, I am incapable of connecting the current version of you to the past version. I've already forgotten about my past." Finn didn't understand why Albert specifically came looking for him. Right now, he could only move one step at a time and test the waters. Albert broke into quiet laughter, an all-knowing expression on his face. In a deck of tarot cards, there's a card called Death. Usually, people are terrified of drawing the Death card. However, rather than actual death, the Death card typically signifies the ending of the past and the beginning of a new future. Committing suicide by leaping into the sea is the result of the despair you felt over your past life. After being reborn, you obviously will not be the same person. "Mr. Albert, are you here to talk about the meaning of life with me? I've read a few works about China. In one of them, it mentioned how after a phoenix bursts into flame, it will be reborn from its own ashes. Of course, that has to do with fire. You fell into the ocean." Albert added a long stream of strange-sounding sentences. "Mr. Tang, can you tell me? Why do I become more curious the more I learn about you? Also, in a world this big, the two of us managed to meet here by chance. God has let us meet. This is our destiny." Albert's expression made it seem like he was performing a Shakespearean play. At that thought, Finn felt an urge to laugh, but he resisted. Nodding slightly, he said, "Yes, maybe. Albert, exactly what are you trying to say? You're merely bored for the moment and want to pass the time by teasing me. People like me can be found everywhere on the streets." Even though Albert leaned in towards him, Finn sat in his spot with a smile, appearing calm on the surface. But thinking of the worst possible scenarios, Finn felt he should probably ask for help. Pretending that he was shifting positions, Finn leaned forward and used the opportunity to take his phone out of his back pocket. Using his memory, Finn typed in a series of numbers on the keypad. As if nothing was happening, Finn continued speaking with Albert. Albert smiled and shook his head. "Few people can remain as calm as you when facing me. Not to mention, right now you're secretly asking for help on your phone." He didn't want to enrage Albert. Finn placed his phone on the table. The phone's screen showed that the call had already connected and that the one at the end of the line was Tristan. Despite knowing that Finn had been secretly calling for help, Albert wasn't the slightest bit angry. In fact, his mood improved when he heard Finn's straightforward confession. "I was born to do this line of work. Nothing can be concealed from my eyes." Albert spread his arms and chuckled. He stood from his seat, collected Finn's phone from the table, and ended the call to Tristan. Afterwards, Albert stepped towards Finn. While doing so, he said, "I like beautiful things. Like the flower bud before it blossoms. Like the pure, green skin of a sour apple that is yet to ripen and become red. I have the patience to wait however long I need to." Stopping right behind Finn, Albert bent down and placed his mouth right next to the actor's ear. The warm breath on his earlobe gave Finn a somewhat strange and uncomfortable feeling. "I will wait until the day you become the brightest star in the sky." Albert then returned the phone to Finn. Taking advantage of the moment, Albert clasped the actor's hand in a tight grip. Not a bit of sweat, trembling, or even a hint of panic. "Your exceeding calm is very likable. It's the fundamental requirement for an actor." Finn lifted his eyes and looked towards the door. Tristan was standing there, slightly out of breath. Albert also noticed Tristan. Smiling, he straightened up and walked towards the door. "President Liu, we meet again." Tristan pushed aside the two watchdogs blocking the doorway. Seeing that Finn was all right, Tristan did not hurry over to the actor's side but glanced coldly at Albert and said, "I believe our deal has already ended." "This doesn't have anything to do with our deal, President Liu." A slight smile appeared on Albert's face as he continued, "I accidentally came across Finn and enjoyed a cup of coffee with him. You don't need to be so tense. I haven't touched a finger of his." As Finn was sitting a bit far, he couldn't hear what the two were talking about. He leaned back on his chair and yawned. Today, he had woken up extra early that despite having coffee just now, he still felt sluggish and tired. Jet lag always took a toll on his body. Finn picked up his cup and took another sip of coffee. He glanced again at Tristan and Albert. The two of them were still discussing something. Although Finn couldn't hear their conversation, he'd guessed that they were discussing him. He'd caught both men looking over in his direction several times. Finn hoped Tristan wasn't selling him off in a business deal again. Otherwise, he'd definitely give the ice-cold man a hard kick to the back. Finn looked down at his phone screen. Strangely, it showed that he'd called an unknown number just a while ago. Out of curiosity, Finn called the number again. A few seconds later, Albert pulled his phone out of his pockets. Finn immediately ended the call. When had Albert messed with his phone? Smiling, Albert waved at Finn. Tristan, on the other hand, glared at the actor. He called out, "Finn, come over here." "Am I a puppy?" Despite his thoughts, Finn stood up and walked over to the other two. When Finn reached his side, Tristan immediately caught the actor's hand in a tight grip and wound his other arm around Finn's waist. "Not only does he belong to me, he belongs to Charles as well. In other words, Finn belongs to both of us." This. Exactly what is this? Finn could feel all sorts of thoughts riling up inside him, but he kept a calm smile on the surface. "Is this true? But I just witnessed you having a date with another man." Albert looked at Finn. If they were putting on an act, then as a professional actor, Finn was going to act until the end. With that, Finn took a step closer towards Tristan. "Are you talking about Michael Gino? He's my co-actor for my next film. We were just talking about the script." "Is that right? If that's the case, I suppose I shouldn't keep vying for someone else's beloved." Smiling, Albert leveled a long glance at Finn. He then turned and left the terrace. The fake waiters immediately followed after Albert. "What is going on here? Since when did I belong to you and Charles?" Finn admired his own calm attitude. If it were someone else, they'd probably be yelling right now. Pulling Finn with him, Tristan walked out of the coffee shop. "Albert's interested in you. I only told him that you belong to Charles and me to prevent him from making a move. We can go back and talk." Finn and Tristan returned to their hotel suite. After closing the door, Finn turned and saw Tristan looking at him with an unhappy expression. "I seem to remember telling you to come back here after talking with the director and that I would be waiting for you. Yet without a word, you went to have coffee with someone." Tristan took off his jacket and tossed it onto the couch. Loosening his tie, he plopped down and gazed questioningly at Finn. "I don't think there's a clause in my contract stating that I have to listen to your every word like a slave." Finn walked towards the bar in the room. He took out a glass and ice and poured himself some whiskey. The weather was starting to become too warm for his liking. "Is that so? I also don't think there's a clause in your contract stating that you can call your boss whenever something troublesome happens, right?" Finn tipped his head back and took a drink of the whiskey. He turned and leaned against the bar. Smiling, he said, "Tristan, don't put it that way. Who were the ones responsible for Albert's interest in me? If you hadn't given me away to Charles and if Charles hadn't brought me to that meeting, would I have ever met Albert? I don't ask for much. I simply want to be an actor, to enjoy the pleasures of being able to act and the fame and wealth of being successful. I'm not interested in joining the criminal world." Just as Finn mentioned the criminal world, Tristan reached behind him, pulled a black handgun out of his waistband, and stored it in a box right in front of the actor's eyes. Finn sighed and said, "I also don't want to see something like that." "You've already seen it," Tristan said irritatingly. Finn rolled his eyes. "Tristan, can you at least try to be a good boss?" "Finn, I can see your potential. It doesn't matter who you were before or what you have done. I know you will become a true star." Tristan walked right up to Finn and gazed into his eyes. He reached out and took the glass of whiskey from the actor's hand. Even while tipping his head back to take a drink, his eyes never left Finn. "That's my whiskey. Right now it's in my stomach." Tristan handed the empty glass back to the actor. "And soon it'll be in the toilet," Finn replied with a remark that completely destroyed the mood. Tristan couldn't resist chuckling. "You weren't like this before. Maybe it's because you've never tried learning more about me?" "I'll do my best to learn more about you from now on," Tristan said with a downcast gaze. His voice also seemed to have softened. From what Tristan told him, Finn managed to gain a basic understanding of Albert's character. Albert was a Northern European whose family originated from Denmark. He was born in France, but raised in England. His family held considerable power and influence in Europe and had a hand in many different businesses. Simply put, Albert was both rich and powerful. His parents passed away when he was young, so he had been raised by his grandfather. In a large family like Albert's, for him to have climbed to the top at his young age meant he had both the brains and the means to be successful. However, Finn wasn't interested in Albert's success story. He'd surmised that the stress of being part of a powerful family had left Albert no other option but to scheme and fight for survival from a very young age. Due to his unhappy childhood, Albert's personality turned out completely twisted. There was no structured order in his actions. If it had merely been Charles or Tristan alone, Albert might have picked up a torch and started a fire. However, he was facing two evenly matched adversaries. No matter how interested he was in Finn, Albert would never devolve into an idiotic male lead in a romantic comedy airing on prime time just for a man. Before Albert gives up on you, you can't date anyone. Can you accept this condition? Tristan summed up the results of their discussion with a question. They needed to maintain the lie until Albert turned his eyes to someone else. If you're asking me to predict whether I'll be attracted to someone in the future, that'll be too difficult. Finn wrinkled his nose. He didn't like being restricted. I don't like this. If you feel it's unfair, just think about how it'll be for Charles and me. For these few months, Charles and I won't touch anyone else. Finn looked at Tristan skeptically. He could believe it if Tristan was only talking about himself. But Charles? He was Charles. How would he be able to endure? I don't want to owe you. Can't we think of something else? You said before that it's mine and Charles' fault that Albert took an interest in you. Since that's the case, you don't have to feel like you owe us anything. As for other ways, well, it's not that there aren't any. Albert likes novel things. If you sleep with him once, there is a chance he would lose interest and stop bothering you. Tristan frowned when he came to the last sentence. He glanced at Finn, who was thinking over the situation. Are you actually considering it? Finn quickly shook his head and ended the discussion. Forget it. I'll take it one step at a time and go along with your idea for now. Suddenly remembering something, Tristan asked, what were you and Albert talking about? Finn thought back to their conversation and ran through the bunch of nonsense Albert had told him. In the human language, the main point of all that nonsense should be, he'll wait until I become famous before taking me. That means I have nothing to worry about, for now at least. Albert doesn't think I match up to him. A slightly miffed expression appeared on Tristan's face when he heard Finn's explanation. For what reason then did they have that long discussion about what to do? In self-comfort, Tristan said, then our plan will be handy when you become famous. Finn nodded in response. Before that, he could freely date whoever he wanted. Finn's role in the movie was officially finalized after the meeting with director Liam. After Tristan looked over everything, Finn was allowed to put his name on the numerous contracts. Filming would officially begin in 3 months. When that time comes, Finn would fly to the United States again and enter the cast for the first important film of his rebirth. This film probably wouldn't have an outstanding box office, but it would provide him a great opportunity to showcase his talent to the public. After staying in the United States for 5 days, Finn and Tristan flew back to S-City. Like how Tristan promised, he finally started acting like a president of an entertainment company. Besides turning down the invitations from TV stations, he had also contacted a few high-end magazines and set up photoshoots for Finn. I'd thought you would want me to have more public exposure. Finn was reclining on a wooden lounge chair overlooking the swimming pool in Tristan's mansion. Maintaining a certain air of mystery for a celebrity is a type of appeal. Tristan clearly had his own opinions on the matter. Then what do you think of my current level of mysteriousness? Finn smilingly tilted his head to look at Tristan. Tristan didn't need to answer the question. He looked back at Finn. The actor had been shrouded in mystery ever since he woke up from diving into the ocean. Tristan enjoyed the mystery. He had no desire to investigate why Finn had changed.